I put 2 clips in there that I thought were relevant and worth listening to.
You put 3.
I put my tweet in there, right? But I think I put the video without my tweet.
Okay.
I would go with the War on Christianity one first.
Yep, that's what I got here. Besides Tucker and Joel Webbin, are there actually any other prominent non-Catholics speaking out about the Israel thing?
Dude, I'm telling you, it is kind of interesting that every voice out there is Catholic. It's Catholics have a bigger spotlight on the world stage, or the American media stage right now than anybody else. They're everywhere.
Yeah. Bobby's got because I know Bobby would probably have given us $20 to show this on YouTube. I'll read it. Bobby says about the trads saying that about the Novus Ordo. That would be awful, but the Novus Ordo crowd doesn't help when they cheer on the persecution of the trads. And that's true too.
Yeah, 100%. Look, the fact is, if persecution comes, a lot of those normie Novus Ordo Catholics that go to mass every week, they're going to bail, and they're just cultural Catholic. The cultural Catholics are not going to face persecution. They'll deny our Lord.
Yeah,
they just will. And all right, we'll do the Tucker stuff first, and then we'll get. I want to get into some of the conversation with Christian Wagner and even Majorian. Okay. Like remember the tweet the other day where even you were like, well, what about the triumph of Our Lady? We kind of got to discuss that a little bit, because we have to have a proper understanding of what our King requires of us and what victory looks like in Christianity. So let's do the Tucker thing first, though.
Something maybe even more important than whether we have a nuclear war. What could be more important than that? Well, your soul, the way we worship God, whether we acknowledge God or not. That's more important ultimately than anything else. And you have to think through, could there be a spiritual component to what we're watching? Is it just a conventional escalation ladder in a badly thought out war with ill-defined goals, and we just wound up in this really tough place where we face either humiliation on the one side or a nuclear launch on the other? That's part of what it is, but could it be something bigger than that? Is it possible that what you're watching is a very stealthy yet incredibly effective attack on what, from a Christian perspective, is the true faith, belief in Jesus? Is that what really is under attack here? Maybe that's what's been under attack for a long time, maybe our whole lifetime,
forever.
Maybe almost everything we see is an attack on that faith, the one faith that is always attacked, always and everywhere for 2,000 years. It's one. Many faiths have been attacked. Many religious people of different religions have been killed over the past 2,000 years. But there's been only one sustained effort to exterminate a faith, and that's the Christian faith. Could that be part of it?
Most especially during the 20th century, when you had all the communist regimes come up and things like that. But
ever since the Enlightenment.
Yeah, and more specifically, the Catholic faith.
Yeah.
So, Tucker's not Catholic, but he is getting to something where, even the onslaught of immorality that has come about in our lifetimes, but really since the Enlightenment, like you said, it's always been about undermining Christian society. It's always been about undermining the civilization that the Catholic Church built. And that filth really amped up after the Second World War. Right? With media, the way things that they depict in movies and TV shows, the propaganda to undermine Christian moral principles has been in overdrive for the past 75 years specifically. I mean, it's
really since World War I. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just that has been what we've been dealing with. So, and the thing is, the further you get away from living an authentic Christian Catholic specifically, the further you get away from living an authentically Catholic life, the more dulled your conscience gets, the darker your intellect gets, and the more acceptable comments from Donald Trump dropping the F-bomb on Easter get. Like the things that Trump said on Easter were reprehensible. The things he said in the following days, and even before Easter, he started off with putting them back to the Stone Age on Good Friday. He said that, I think that was Good Friday. Talked about putting Iran back into the Stone Age. Then on Easter Sunday, praise Allah, dropping the F-bomb, ending a civilization. Like it was just like Tucker. The clip I put in is kind of important though. The one with my tweet, because Tucker makes this point. Yeah, let's go back to go to my
instead of the one where he talks.
Yeah, because that one has to preempt the Tucker one, because he talks about Trump purposely not putting his hand on the Bible, which is an interesting, because what Tucker is very heavily implying that Trump is the man of lawlessness in Second Thessalonians. That's what he's saying. I don't know if he is. That's what Tucker's saying.
And is it possible that the president sees this not just in geostrategic terms and military terms and economic terms, got open and straight? Okay. Is it possible the president sees this in bigger terms? Sees this as the fulfillment of something, or the elevation to some higher office beyond President of the United States? That's entirely possible. And that's not an attack, but it's also not a guess. Because at every turn since the inauguration last January, there have been religious leaders on the scene telling us out loud. Most of us ignored it because we're just so secular, we just sort of ignore it. Got some sleazy Southern Baptist preacher who says whatever for money. Okay, got it. We've ignored that this could actually be real. There's something going on here. And we shouldn't ignore that. We should always remember that just because we're a secular nation, have been overwhelmingly secular, maybe not coincidentally since we dropped those atom bombs 80 years ago, doesn't mean that we live in a world where everyone else is secular. And it definitely doesn't mean that the spiritual realm has been eliminated, that is not real, that the only things that matter are the things that we can see and hear and feel and taste and measure. Talk about fake. Talk about a silly religion. That's the silly religion.
I guess
life in the life that every person.
Yeah, it is the same clip.
Yeah, it's the same clip. So either way, he started off the show talking about how Trump didn't put his hand on the Bible, and very intentionally looked like he didn't put his hand on the Bible not because he doesn't believe the Bible, but because he very much does, and he doesn't want to be held to account for putting his hand on the Bible because he doesn't plan on following anything in it.
Yeah, but I don't think he believes the Bible.
Yeah, I don't either. But either way, since the assassination attempt, especially, I mean, Trump's entire run, he's been surrounded by zealous, insane Protestants, right? But then after the assassination attempt, how many people like Trump has been chosen by God to lead us into this thing? So the question,
like this right here,
Donald Trump will lead the stone cut from the mountain. The mountain represents the Roman Catholic Church. The stone is the remnant. This is the psychopathy. Yes. This is Vigano, right? Vigano getting into talking about Trump as the catacomb. Like, are you kidding me? Trump is the catacomb?
The church fathers would laugh that.
The absurdity of some of these trads and sedis, man, like they're just laughably retarded. I'm sorry. Laughably retarded. Like if that's your position, I don't know, man. Trump is, oh my gosh, man. Like but the question that Tucker poses, does Trump see himself as some kind of biblical like figure?
I do think yes. I mean, just because he's such a narcissist, I think he does see himself in that sort of fashion.
Dude, he's acting like an emperor, right? Like he's acting like Nero. He's acting like this country is his to do whatever he wants with. He can just go in and sweep out any leaders anywhere in the world. Whereas we used to like kind of hide our stuff with CIA ops and things like that. Trump's just like, nope, I'm doing it. It's kind of crazy what he does, man. And so I mean, it poses the question, could Trump be the Antichrist? I saw an interesting post from American Reform the other day. Let me pull it up. Hang on. So, okay. So he said, by all available evidence, Trump is not the Antichrist. But notice the similarities he bears with the coming of the man of sin, the lawless one who does not fear God, let alone his laws. From this, we perceive a third character of Antichrist, namely that he will not simply be the antagonist, but the substitute or supplanter of the true Messiah. And this is rendered still more probable by the fact that the Messiah looked for by the Jews has always been a temporal deliverer, the restorer of the temporal power, or in other words, a political and military prince. But those who have lost faith in the incarnation, such as humanitarians, rationalists, and pantheists, may well be deceived by any person of great political power and success who should restore the Jews to their own land and the people of Jerusalem once more with the sons of the patriarchs. And there is nothing in the political aspect of the world which renders such a combination impossible. That was Cardinal Manning said that. And then he posted a couple of things underneath it. Now, look, the thing is, like, American Reform said to me, he's like, oh, well, you know, I do think we're in the end times, but I still think a lot of things need to happen, like the two witnesses and things like that. But that stuff comes after the Antichrist. And I also don't want to have such an American centric view of things where it's like, yeah, okay, Trump might be deceiving Catholics in America, but what about the rest of the Catholics in the world? He's not deceiving. Like, he's hated everywhere.
He's not even deceiving much of the Catholics in America.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, I mean, how can he be the Antichrist when when 50% of America despise him and 75% of the rest of the world? Like, the Antichrist is supposed to be beloved by, you know, it's supposed to fool nearly everyone, including the church. So I don't see how Trump fulfills that part of it.
Yeah, I don't either. But he could be some type of forerunner figure. He could be, like,
I agree. Is he a type of Antichrist?
Yeah, he's definitely.
I'm okay with that.
He's probably a type. Look, it's hard to say. We're not going to know. You know, the thing that freaks me out is the stuff he did under COVID and the way he's acting now. But I don't know. I mean, how can you know? I just see him as a very significant figure, whatever that means. Like, whether he is the actual man of lawlessness. I mean, he's certainly acting like him, but yeah, I don't know. The other thing that kind of connects with this is like what was my tweet that I put out that you had said to me. So I was talking about I said something like the days of triumphalist Christianity are over. Like the days of conquering the pagan nations, and you know, that, like, those days are just not. That's not the time we live in. And you pushed back on me and said, "What about the triumph of Our Lady's Immaculate Heart?"
I would say it's not the time we've been living in, but there's no. Why couldn't we enter a new phase of history where it is?
We always could, right? Like, that possibility is always there. But the way to that is not going to be comfortable anyway.
No,
the road to that will not be comfortable in any way whatsoever. And I think that this ridiculous idea of all these new converts coming in, Catholics are so taking over. Like, I think that's a silly mindset. The truth is, like, especially, look, we're dealing with this, the question of Islam, things like that. We opened our borders and we let Muslims flood in. They clearly are trying to stoke tensions between Muslims and Christians. Now, I'm not going to buy into the E. Michael Jones thesis that we need to buddy up with Muslims.
Yeah, that's
I'm not going to
that's a
buy into
doozy.
that thesis.
For
But
anyone just joining us or joined us recently, something happened with the stream to YouTube, something that we couldn't fix. It's between something in the software. So we're streaming on Twitter, Rumble, and Locals.
so if because you had even said this to me, you were like, "Oh, we'll defeat the Saracens" or something like that, which I don't disagree with. But the way
I think I said the cross will conquer both.
Yes.
The crescent and the star of Raphan, which is
which I
what they call
agree
the Star
with.
of David.
Yeah, I agree with, but
and I mean it in the way you're trying to say, like the cross, like the way of the cross will.
The thing is, like
things.
the way through all of this is going to be Calvary, man. Like all of this, everything we're seeing happening right now, the way through this is the passion. Like the way through, the way to our victory is not. You can't think like the Jews do, where it's like the conquering church. Like the way through this is martyrdom.
I guess I don't know many people that really, those who are triumphalistic, I don't see them triumphalistic in the way you're seeing them. Like I think many people who want the church to be triumphant recognize that like the martyrs of the first few centuries of the church, like they conquered the Roman Empire. That you can't get more triumphalistic than
through
that.
The martyr,
but they did so through martyrdom.
Yeah, through martyrdom, like getting thrown in the Colosseum. So that's all I was saying. So people think I'm blackpilling, and I don't think I'm blackpilling at all. This is what it means. Like our king is a suffering king, and that's the way through this. And I don't see any other way around it. I don't see us taking political power. I see persecution coming.
Remember, the martyrs did eventually take political power through their martyrdom.
So but where we are in the world today, I see a passion before, especially because of the situation in the church, like the how degraded the church is in every aspect, in her liturgy, in her hierarchy, and all those things. Like it is going to take a tremendous amount of suffering of the saints to restore the church. And there's just no way around that. That's not a black pill. That's a recognition of what we signed up for at baptism.
Well, in response to your post where I asked about, Our Lady of Fatima, what she says about the triumph of the Immaculate Heart, like even Our Lady says, that if the popes don't consecrate Russia, which they haven't, let's just be honest, and they're unlikely to do so before time runs out in 3 years, like, Our Lady says, whole nations will be destroyed. And she's not talking about like states, and she's not talking about like a political government. When she says whole nations will be destroyed, she means whole peoples will be wiped off the face of the earth. But in the end, the triumph of the Immaculate Heart.
So that's all I was saying. So yes, the triumph of the Immaculate Heart, but there is a city in ruins, the Pope walking over dead bodies.
And let's be honest, like the nations that look like the peoples that are going to be destroyed, it looks very much like many of those are going to be European peoples wiped off the map by the Mohammedans.
You go to Our Lady of Akita, same thing. Fire will fall from the sky, a deluge not seen since the days of Noah. Like this is what is ahead of us. So whether it's the end or just the beginning of something new, that is what lies ahead of us, and people have to recognize that. And that's not a defeatist black pill. That is, hey, like that doesn't mean you don't still do Catholic action. That doesn't mean you don't still try to make inroads, but it's just about people need to recognize the times we're in, and the times we're in is increasingly hostile towards the faith. As much as like we have a voice now and it feels like we're out there talking, that's going to turn quickly. And we thought it was going to turn through, which it still very much is, like with the whole LGBT thing. Like they've managed to make love hate and hate love, right? Like they've managed to invert what is good and what is evil. in our general society. So yes, we might have a victory here and a victory there with certain things, and maybe in media here and media there. But the reality is that's the world hates us. And Christ warns us of this. And he says, the world hated me first. Don't be surprised when they hate you. So it's what I see on the horizon. And I don't think that's blackpilling. I think that's like, we should honestly, like, the proper Christian response is longing for martyrdom. I mean, when you have families, that's not easy.
I wouldn't say, I don't know. I don't know if we should long for martyrdom, right? Like,
I don't know. You read Ignatius as he's on his way to the pit, man. He's like, grind my body up like the Eucharist.
On his way there, it's already happening. But I think if you had asked him prior to that, like, would you rather be martyred or would you rather like convert the emperor like right now? Like one of those is better.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, I don't want to face martyrdom either. It's just the way things are unfolding. I don't think it's a black pill either. And I think that there's, the opportunity to possibly see how the story plays out is also an amazing thing. Like, I don't see that as a black pill. I don't know. But the reality is, what Wagner was getting into was he was reading some of the Old Testament prophecies about how all the nations will like convert, and that period happened already, and the gospel was spread to the whole earth. It has.
You did not have large scale conversions in China. You did not have it in Japan. You did not have it in Korea. Did not have it in South Asia. You didn't have it in Australia.
Yeah, Australia, but the gospel was still preached there. And I don't think it's every nation becomes Catholic. Like, I don't think that's what that means. That's just not how God ever worked in salvation history. It was always preserving a remnant, or it was like, that's just, so I think if you're reading those Old Testament prophecies, you're also forgetting that the church triumphant is part of that. Like, the church triumphant is always growing, and it's always, so it just seems to me that the days of,
we literally still have uncontacted tribes in the world.
Yeah. All right. So I'm not, look, I'm just saying not every single nation will convert like that. I just don't think that's, when you see it in hindsight, it'll seem that way. Just like when we look back on church history and we see like this glorious period of, as the church is spreading in what they call the Dark Ages, is actually the most beautiful age of the church. The time of the church fathers. It's the time of the spread of Christianity, and it goes right up. That first millennium of Christianity is kind of what you're seeing where that's happening. And who's to say that, like, the world could have been just the known world at the time? Could have, no, I don't know. There's a lot to think about in that. But either way, what it seems like at this point is that the church herself is telling us, like, the Great Commission is over.
The Great Commission is never over.
But the church seems to be acting that way, right? By inviting other religions to the Vatican, and instead of calling them to convert,
but just because the church acts that way doesn't mean we should say, "Oh, end of the world." Then I guess
I don't think any of us should ever say that.
Right.
But you can still see what's happening. Like, you can still see what's happening.
But that doesn't mean it has to happen.
I don't know.
We still have agency. We still have free will.
Of course. Nobody's saying, and I'm not saying resign yourself to the end of the world either. But that's kind of the point. But recognizing the signs of the times is not a black pill either. So,
but you have to recognize that they are only signs of the current times, and that we can still change things, and we can make things better. And no, we're never going to have a utopia on Earth, but
especially through penance, right? Because that's everything Our Lady tells us is penance. I'm having a hard time holding back the wrath of my son right now. Like, that's all. Like, and what we talked about with Sam Shamoun was the debt ceiling of sin, that God can only tolerate so much before he just loses it. And that's what happened with Israel. When Jesus, in Matthew 23, Jesus goes to the Pharisees, and he's like, you have reached the debt ceiling of sin. God is fed up. You will have one generation to repent. And if you do not repent, all of this is going to be destroyed. And I think that was Our Lady coming to us in Fatima, and he gave us more than a generation. I mean, literally, Our Lady was saying to us at Fatima the same thing Jesus was saying to the Pharisees before the temple was destroyed. And I can't not, I'm not going to just write that off. And that doesn't mean there won't be a resurrection of the church after and another age of the church after. But what we're heading into right now is going to be rough, is all I'm saying. And if we do hope to have some kind of a return to Christendom or a return to Christian civilization, it's the way through that is going to be through the cross. Like, it's going to be rough. It's the only way to see it. Like, it's not going to be some triumphalistic thing where the church is doing
once again. I mean,
it's not behaving like it did in the Middle Ages. Is all I'm saying.
I think maybe you have a misconception, like the middle, like,
well, the earlier centuries.
The Middle Ages, they were fighting crusades within Europe from against pagans.
Fighting crusades, though. Nobody's calling a crusade now. Nobody's calling a crusade now. And when the Muslims attack, it is not going to be a crusade against it. It's going to be, we need to sit in dialogue. It's not going to be called from the church, though.
Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah, nobody knows the future.
Well, right.
I'm just
saying.
Right.
So stop acting like you do. And even though you're not, I know you're not. I know you're not. I know
you're being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian.
No. I know you're not. But the way you come off sometimes on Twitter and on here to people who don't know you as well is that it does come off as blackpilling.
Yeah,
it does come off as nihilistic.
It's reality, and it should be.
It's
all of us
potentially reality.
No, it's reality in that the way of a Christian's life is one marked by suffering. And if we want any hope of rebuilding something, we better, that's how it works. Like our king is a suffering king. And if you want the things that people are saying they want, we have to embrace that. And we have to be willing to suffer in order to get that.
Yes. Okay. I understand. When we now look on periods like the Middle Ages, like the Crusades, for instance, and we see them as this glorious, triumphalistic age of Christianity, we have to understand that at that time, it did not feel that way to those men. Those men were the scourge of Islam was raging all across Europe,
all over Europe.
It was literally had Europe in a stranglehold. Like, if you read the battles of the Crusades, the first crusade, every battle they won, it was literally due to actual miracles when they took Antioch and when they took Jerusalem. Like, there is no way those men should have won. They thought they were walking into certain death each and every single time. And it ended up glorious, but they suffered. They suffered far more than you and I suffer. Sure, I agree. It's not going to feel triumphalistic to us, but if we win 500 years from now, if the world's still around, it might seem that way to them.
But what we're embarking on right now is all I'm trying to get at. Like, there can be this glorious resurrection. There can be this glorious return. But the way there is going to not be by owning the Protestants on Twitter. Like, that's not. I agree. That's not going to be the way we do it. That's all I'm saying. It's not going to be by electing somebody to office.
Damn, can Joe Hershmeyer own them though?
That was oh man! If you guys have even 25 minutes to watch, just go watch the cross exam between Joe Hershmeyer and Doug Wilson. Joe, what's crazy is Joe is so comfortable because he knows he has the winning argument. Like, he's just like sitting there and not even trying. And Doug Wilson is so nervous. He's stuttering.
He's like, I'm like, oh man, he got destroyed.
Yeah. I think, I just think that we should be preparing people for what it means to be like, like the whole purpose of fasting, and the whole purpose is of all of the sacrifices you make as a Catholic. That's why, like the newcomers, my first advice is get into a life of fasting, because what you're doing is preparing yourself. Because we very easily could be in a situation where we only have God to depend on, and that would be a great mercy from him, and it would lead to mass death at the same time. Right? You have something where, like, we're so dependent on our devices, we're so dependent on our modern everything. If something happened where we were knocked back to the Stone Age, you'd literally, the only thing you'd have to depend on is God. You'd have none of your modern comforts. And as horrible of a situation as that would be, it might just be the thing that saves our souls.
Yeah.
You know, so that's just the view, I think, a proper Christian view of it, because especially with all the way the world events are working right now, it's between the AI thing, the alien thing, the visions of Our Lady that came, all the stuff, like you'd be naive to not consider these things, is all I'm saying. Like, you'd be naive to not consider these things. And I'm not saying go the route of the people who chase apparitions, and they're always, oh, the end of the world's coming and we need our 3 days of darkness candles and things like that. It's just prepare yourself for something. Like, prepare yourself the way the church has always taught us to prepare ourselves, through fasting and through, like, denying ourselves pleasures. Because, man, I think about, like, even if the economy crashed, right?
It's just, did you see the revised numbers for the end of last year?
It just, an economy crash is not something that is, like, out of, like, it could very easily come. We could very easily end up back in a Great Depression. And think about how many people took their lives during the Great Depression, right? Because I know so many people who live lives of such comfort and luxury, and God isn't even on their minds. And if they lost all their material goods, I don't see how I don't know what they would do. People I love, people in my life, that I just think if their material possessions were just suddenly gone and they didn't have the millions in the bank that they're used to, like, that is going to lead to catastrophe for those people. And we can't have that perspective as Christians. Like, we just really can't. So, so I would have jumped over to locals at this point. We're already on locals, but I got.
Do we want to make it locals only?
Yeah, we could. Well,
because we're on Twitter and Rumble right now, and in the local, I haven't clicked the members only part on local. So
yeah, let's do locals only. You guys